Hello, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Bad Boss with Anya Soto, where we talk about culture and leadership and how not to be bad boss. Today I'm here with Jamie Jacobs, I see her as like the OG of HR space in San Diego. I feel like you've worked with so many companies across so many industry. Jamie is also a co-founder of the Geek Talent. It's a collective of the best HR consultants and coaches. They do fractional HR. That's why, again, similarly, Jamie gets to kind of work with different companies of various sizes. What they do is they pair organizations with the right on demand resources to partner to solve most complex people and organizational challenges. I am happy to be one of their consultants. We've done some work together. So today we're just going to chat about culture, workplace culture, and the trends that we're seeing in the workplace. Hi, Jamie.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Anya.
No, thank you for giving me your time. I feel like since I moved to San Diego 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago, I saw you and him online everywhere on LinkedIn and the Geek Talent, and I've always had this curiosity. I'm like, what do you guys do? Like, this sounds like so cool, and I love the name with our gig economy. I mean, you're so spot on. So I wanted, since both you and I work with so many companies of different sizes across all industries, I really wanted to chat today about the trends that we're seeing in the market. And I know you referred to Gartner, kind of like a research publication that just came out. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit, what are some categories that most companies are struggling with? And then we can talk about today's session kind of conversation will be around signals when it's time to invest in your culture and when is it time to focus on other things.
I love it. Well, first of all, we were so excited to welcome you to San Diego, and now I see you everywhere when I'm out, which is
I
really
know.
it makes
I
me happy.
know.
Yeah, it's what's really interesting right now is these trends that we're seeing at a macro level across the workforce. In all the organizations that we're partnering with, and I'm sure you as well, we're seeing different tensions, right? And I think it helps us to kind of understand, like, oh, it's not just us, right? Even though it might be showing up differently in your company or in your organization, there's tensions around flexibility, right? Controversy. Have you demanded people be on site? How many people are actually coming? How are you mandating that? How do the employees feel about, are they actually more productive at home? All of that. So the whole thing around flexibility is definitely a big one.
Yeah.
And Gartner's data supported that as well. The other thing that's starting to come up is productivity, right? So like they said that 58% of companies are afraid that they're not going to be able to meet their performance targets for the year. But then what we're hearing from employees is that they don't think they can sustain working at the same level. And so that's a big tension. And I think as we start to like dig under that, which I think we'll do in the conversation,
Mhm.
we're not always talking about the same thing. And in some cases, relying on those really high performers, and they are getting more and more burnout or taking on more pressure. And it may not be consistent like throughout the
Yeah.
organization. Then the third one is transformation, just tons of change, right? I mean, as a culture, we've gone through so much change. And then the final one is trust, which I think you and I will dig into a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And I just want to mention that, yeah, yesterday I was presenting like with one of the Vistage groups, and we talked a lot about accountability and ownership and like that lack of trust. And also, I think with that high performance comes this like management by fear and management by scarcity and management that it's like we're not meeting our goals and people are on this high alert constantly, right? And we know that you can't sustain that. Like you cannot work on adrenaline the whole time. At some point you're going to collapse, and that's the burnout. And the second piece, yeah, I always talk about lack of ownership and accountability. To me, it stems from, if I don't trust your intentions, if I don't trust that you got my back, if I don't trust that you actually care about me, I'm not going to take ownership. Like, why
Yep.
would I do that? I'll just do what you tell me to do and then blame you and be like, well, that wasn't my idea in the first place. Jamie said we should do it, so we did it. I don't know. And that's what we're seeing, that like that accountability ownership is a huge piece. Burnout is a big piece. But I love the word you use, like tensions, because to me, tension is a spectrum and it's a yes and we're always looking at leadership because they're like, should we go to work or should we like stay home? Yes and like both.
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Like
And
all of these concepts.
I think you're so right because it's also some language. I think that some of what's happening is many of us leaders who have built our career successfully, for over 20 years, we're leveraging kind of old levers. We're
Mhm.
going to old habits that and
Yeah,
assumptions that used to work, right? And language that used to work. And it doesn't necessarily work in the same way, right? And so we're kind of missing that component of really enrolling people in the why
mhm,
and at a personal level. Like to your point, do you care about me and what's in it for them career wise and what we're trying to accomplish together in the work? So that there's because most people want to do a good job, right? I think there's generally a certain sense of self accountability, but only if they understand why. And where
yeah,
we think those connections are like just assumed and people should totally get
yeah.
it, I think that's just wrong. They're missing that, right? So
Totally. And the whole perception of like, should we go back or not? Ask your people. What type of work are you doing? What's valuable to them? When I did this with a couple of companies and we had a leadership meeting and some management, and I said, what do you guys best do at home? And what do you do best at work? Like with others? What's the collaboration? But I feel like that's the sense of ownership. Like we talk about top down doesn't work. Like that enrolling skill, right? Of like, what makes sense? Like we're
it's
all adults.
Yeah, it's the perfect time. First of all, you're right. We're all adults, and that's like a big theme, right? But also this idea of co-creation, to me, it's like such an awesome time because we're all innovating, right? If anybody's using an old playbook, like it's not going to work, right? So, it's not that leadership or HR or whoever has all the answers,
Yeah,
right? So let's co-create. Let's involve people. Yeah, we're going to have guidelines. We have, values in our organization. We have things we need to accomplish, but let's co-create together, and I think it's actually more fun for everybody.
totally. And that's the piece of ownership. Because if I'm part of co-creation, then I'm part of co-ownership of it. And that's the co, right? Which is great, kind of segue to again what we're seeing, right? That a lot of companies are going through budget cuts, layoffs. It's just insane. I feel like everybody I talk to, somebody in their family has been laid off recently, like all my friends, a lot of people in leadership development, and again budget cuts.
Yeah,
So companies are facing the dilemma, right, of like, where do we invest? And that is everyday conversations that I have. Should we like go hard on sales and invest in sales and revenue generating activities? Should we try to retain people that we have left and that productivity, right? Again, like what do you think the work is going after you lay off people? Does the work just disappear? Because I mean, somebody
right.
has to do the work. So
We
it's like,
always say, when are we going to stop? But I never hear it. Usually there's not a great answer, right?
yeah, I'm like, and okay, you're laying off like 20% of your workforce. Oh, what's happening with the work? Have the clients agreed to like a lower customer service and a lower deliverables? Hell no. Everyone demands even more. It's like the market is even more competitive. So let's talk about when is it time in your experience to kind of invest in culture? And like these are the signals that something is critical and you guys actually like are in need of that co-creation or revamp of your workplace culture.
Yeah, I think so. What's so exciting to me is that we really, even if you entered 2020 with a really strong culture, things have changed. And so the reason that I think people come to Gig Talent for consultants like you and others is to really help understand where they really are, because I think sometimes we don't know.
Yeah.
And but if we're just assuming like we care about culture, we have strong values, like we're fine, but then they might be feeling things that aren't so fine. So we were
Mhm.
talking about some things like sometimes it feels like the leadership team is kind of just going through the motions, right? Their cadence has stayed the same.
Mhm.
People are kind of maybe they're doing their tasks or their departmental responsibilities. There might not be a lot of conversation about kind of enterprise level leadership and really
Just
like
acting by default. Everyone
yeah,
is reporting to the middle once a
yeah,
week.
yeah. And if you feel that as a leader, like, it's probably time to question it, right? Because
Yeah.
that's most of us aren't that way. I mean, it's okay to have moments that are like that, but the organization needs more from their leaders, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
The other thing that we're seeing a lot of is just kind of this like operating in silos, because we default to the tasks and to the specific things, and then people are just working in their teams, right? So there's these kind of functional silos in organizations that are happening, And sometimes that's where like the magic is being missed of that cross-functional partnership and collaboration and innovation, and even like, feeling connection and a sense of belonging beyond kind of your function. So if you
And
feel,
working remotely, right? It kind of
yeah,
added this whole other layer where most people have never even met their colleagues. They don't
yeah,
know
and
them.
they're in meetings with like whoever they're in meetings with, and that may be it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you're feeling that kind of more siloed, that's definitely a signal. This productivity conversation is coming up in almost every company that I'm talking to. How is our productivity? Is everyone being productive? I hear, funny things. I hate to say it, but like, or are people out walking their dog? And I don't think the issue that is that somebody
Yeah.
really cares if somebody's walking their dog. It's really more about the work. Or just level of employee engagement. So if you're not sure really if there's like how engaged employees are and confidence that people are giving their best discretionary effort, that might be a signal too.
Yeah. And what do you suggest when someone comes to you and they're like, I don't know, our productivity is not there. We're not meeting our numbers. People are kind of like failing on their dashboards and stuff. What's your first, I don't know, what is your first inkling of why it's happening?
So, I always think we should do assessment to get really deep in it, but it's, to me, there's usually two things. It kind of always goes to leadership at some level. So how inspired is leadership? How clear is leadership? And then how have they created this really compelling vision to enroll people in? And I think that, and then it's pulling it through. So like what we were talking about how do we co-create? How do we reimagine really all of our cadences in our organizations, right? Like, are we having the right team meetings or the right meetings in person and the right conversations in our one-on-ones and the right ones virtually, and really playing with that, because there's been some cool things actually too by having virtual
Yeah.
meetings. I mean, I used to be in meetings where you have a group around a huge conference table and then a bunch of people on Zoom or virtual, and like they couldn't get a word in edgeways. And now if everybody's in a box,
Yeah.
it's actually more inclusive and you get better ideas, right? So
And I love that kind of redefining those gatherings. And I do agree. It's because, again, you and I are culture geeks. And I'm like, oh my God, I love it. We get to redesign things that are like legacy organizations have been doing for years. It's like, who needs to be in that meeting? Why should they be in that meeting? What is the agenda? Because if I keep going to meetings, but nobody's asking me, like, why am I here? So
yeah.
it's like it's that piece of like, yeah, and productivity, I agree. It is shared ownership, and you said something about clarity, clear expectations, right? Clear working agreements.
Yeah. And, do we talk about those things? Like if we're just assuming that people understand, I think that's dangerous. And, I love what you're talking about too. Like if you're in meetings and people are kind of just waiting for the orders or to be instructed what to do, but they're not really contributing, they're not pushing back, they're not having active, constructive debate, like they may not be as, fully plugged in as we want them to. And we want that energy. We want their thinking. We want the partnership. I mean, nothing's more magical than feeling like you're creating something wonderful with really good people, right? Um,
Exactly.
but if it feels rote, it's not exciting.
To me, it always signals to lack of trust and psychological safety. I'm
Yeah.
always asking, like, so there are four levels I like to speak about. Stages, psychological safety. The first one is inclusion. What you're talking about, it's like, do I even belong here? Do I have anything valuable to add? Like, are these my people? It's the imposter syndrome. It's like, that's the basic level, right? And then there's learner safety. I feel safe enough to ask questions, to not appear stupid.
Yeah.
And then there's contributor safety. Oh, I feel like I am valuable enough to actually contribute something to the conversation. And the last level is the level of a challenger. Now I feel safe enough to challenge. And as a group, we feel safe enough to have disagreements. We feel safe enough to innovate through effective conflicts and like generate that like value. And I feel like this is another question, is like, who is in the meetings and how do you map your team members at like who is just there, just like still just there, who is already asking some questions, and how do you kind of move people from stage to stage of psychological
Do
safety?
you, so my belief on that is like there's ownership on both sides, right? So like the
Mhm.
company absolutely needs to ensure leaders know how to create those environments, to do those things, have those conversations. But then like at a personal development or professional development level, we need to be helping, our employees kind of navigate, like, because, most people feel some level of imposter syndrome, or like, when
Everybody.
you're in your career and you're building confidence, and you're like, I don't want to ask a dumb question, but actually sometimes that question can be like the most powerful thing that unlocks the room. So I'm seeing us try to help it on both sides, like the cultural and leadership side, but then also the professional development, and helping people really lean into kind of their own strengths, which I think is in their authentic self. But some of that they have to, they have to experience. So that's why like coaching can be so effective, to kind of help people step into it. And if leaders can be coaches, that's a really great way for organizations to kind of operationalize it too.
I agree with you. I think it starts with awareness that there is a power dynamic that exists in the room. That's why I have a hard time with psychological safety. That doesn't mean, because you cannot create a safe space for everybody. You can be the most amazing leaders, and people come with, like, they have maybe financial insecurity, they still don't know how they're going to pay their rent, or they've been marginalized their whole life, they might have different life experiences that is preventing them from, like, it's not a safe space to assume like, well, this is a safe space for everybody. Like, they're just power dynamics, period. But on the other end is, how do we, when you talk about enrolling into a vision, it's yesterday I made a post about courage, and courage is about choosing to contribute, choosing to have your voice heard, choosing to like step in when uncomfortable because you care enough.
Yeah.
That's the engagement. Do your people care enough about what you do as a company and what they do in their role to have that courage to contribute?
Yeah, I think that you're right. Courage, leadership courage, stepping into those like direct conversations, giving feedback. I think it's really a phenomenal time, because that's always been important. But I just think that those are skills that need to be. I always point to my gut when I talk about those things, because I can feel it like in my stomach, right? You can probably remember a time in your career where you're like, or even in your personal life, but where you have to go into a tough conversation and you're nervous, but you're going to do it anyway. And I always feel it in my gut, and then you do it, right? And it's like I actually talk a lot with like HR business partners about building that muscle.
Muscle.
And it's like you only build it by doing it, right? You just have to do it. And
Yeah.
so it's been really fun to create some learning experiences and simulations where people actually practice that, because we can talk about it and you can kind of get it, and that gets you far enough to like get in the room ready to do it, but it doesn't give you the experience of actually going through it, and that like relief of like, okay, I did it. And then, okay, I'll never forget. Oh, this is funny. So one time I prepared for a conversation like that. I actually had Hema in the room with me because it was a serious thing. Anyway, I get through it, and afterwards I go, so do you think I did a good job? And she's like, I have no idea what you were talking about. So even when you think you're being clear, you're not necessarily being clear. So now that part, that helped me really learn, like, it's not just deliver the message, because I think I was just relieved to get through whatever I thought I needed to say, but it's actually about engaging in that dialogue and discussing it and like seeing what the other person heard, right? And so it's really a fun journey as you grow.
Yeah, I love it. And I think we are always doing it. Like, I'm still doing things that scare me so much, but to me it always like, is it worth it? Like,
Yes.
what's the purpose? Like, why do it? And then again, like, if the purpose is bigger than my fear, I think it allows you to step in. But again, like, that's why we talk leadership is a choice. Coaching is important because it's like our minds create stories that are so much worse than reality. And every time you do it, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad at all. I didn't sleep for 3 days, but it was actually great. I really enjoyed it,
It's so true. And I think as leaders, like, we sometimes forget how visible everything that we're doing is, and that people are making meaning of it, right? And I'm not saying that to like stress people out and make them sleep less, but I do think that like being intentional is super
Yeah.
important. And just having, if you build those authentic relationships, then you can talk about it. And if somebody is making a story about something, hopefully they'll open up, and that gives a chance to have a
Yeah.
dialogue and provide additional information or perspective.
Again, it's like, and the question is always like, what did you learn about yourself? Like, what are you learning, right? So let's talk. We already have 20 minutes, which I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. It's been 20 minutes. But I want to ask, what are like, let's talk about 2, 3 red flags when it's like, stop and like invest in your culture and your people, bring in consultants because this is too much of a liability right now. It's like, I don't know. Do you have a list of kind of like red flags that maybe you look for when you engage with a new client that would tell you like, it's a culture issue, it's performance management issue?
Yeah, I think it's when you're seeing kind of all those indicators, right? So, one of the worst is if there's people that you're making excuses for in the organization
Oh,
around
yeah.
behavior, you know. But I think it's these, when you're feeling disengaged, you're thinking leadership is disengaged, you feel people are going through the motions, you
Mm,
feel that the culture isn't alive. I mean, a strong culture is so strong that people who aren't aligned kind of self-select out, because it's like you can feel it in a
yeah.
positive way.
Mm.
I think you and I have both moved from like talking about culture fit to more culture add, right? We want people to
Mhm.
add. We don't just want people to fit
Like,
in.
we want them to opt in, like consciously opt in and be like, these are my people. I want to be part of this.
The culture is going to evolve, but we want it to evolve in a really constructive way.
Mhm.
So when you're feeling any of those things, what's really helpful is to come and have somebody, a third party who isn't part of it, come in and do that assessment, right? And then you can decide, okay, how do you prioritize? What can our internal team do? Because it's often not like just a one answer to solve it.
Mhm.
And so how do we really pull it through, and tie kind of, whether it's employee through the employee experience lens, it could also be through brand and marketing and even customer experience. Like today, that connection has to be there. If there's a disconnect, it's felt both with your customers and employees. So I think that leaders know, but they often don't know what to do about it. And sometimes it's ourselves as leaders that are like, yeah, I'm trying everything I can. I'm communicating all I can. I'm working crazy hours. I'm doing all these things. But it's like taking that pause to almost like get up on the balcony in your own organization or team and go like, oh, this is a bigger thing. And I think that's why what we started with some of that Gartner data is just, it's helpful to know it's not just you. It's really happening everywhere, because whatever's going on internally, you may have changed business strategies and all
Mhm.
the changes, as you talk about, like with teams and layoffs and things. But we're not in a vacuum, right? We're all
We're
operating.
being influenced all
Yeah.
the time by each other.
So the whole workforce is having these
Yeah.
changes. So I think it's a great time to pause. I think this is something where it can be very powerful to have somebody else come in who's just has a really blanket approach and lens and third party,
Yeah.
approach, who can see things that people who are in it don't see. And then it's just help you. Most great organizations are able to then realign and then prioritize along with all those other business priorities that you said. But the culture, if you miss that part, it doesn't matter how good your business strategy is,
Yeah.
right? You're not going to be able to deliver.
Mhm. I love the idea of like, what's the macro level, right? Because anytime there's a workplace investigation, for example, right, or there's like HR complaints, or we have a high turnover and employees quitting, I always like to look at like layers, right? So there's like the first layer, and then the second layer, and then the third layer. And often we would see we have a culture of consensus, we have a culture of tolerance.
Yeah.
We have where, again, leaders do not discipline. We tolerate and tolerate and tolerate. We have a culture of like dread. We
We have
have
a
a,
nice culture.
yeah,
So
yeah,
nice that we don't give feedback and we work around people. That's not really nice, right?
yeah. It's nice. It's not kind.
That's right. That's right.
Like I
Absolutely.
love the nice Canadians, right? It's like but it's like being nice. Being kind is actually being involved in someone's future and development, and like being kind by giving them that feedback and clarity of expectations, right? Nice is like just so fake to me. So
You're
it's
right.
like the macro level of like I like to in when I speak at a conference, I would ask them, describe your culture in 3 words. If you could ask all of your employees, or like you would like you're trying to hire me, and I would say like, what's your culture like? Like, this is a good exercise. Like, what three words would you use? Are you a culture of innovation and like productive conflicts and coaching? Are you a culture of, like I said, just get your work done and like get out early? What kind of culture are you? And a lot of
We
leaders,
ask that in our assessment, and
you
it's
do.
really funny because I'm sure you see it then too. Like you
Yeah.
just get really different answers, and sometimes really surprising answers. And that's where like leaders like, oh, I can't believe somebody felt that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, I love this. This has been lovely. Thank you so much for sharing. Again, people will find you. I know Geek Talent is, you guys are all over the country, right? It's not just San Diego based.
Yeah, we're national. We even have a little bit of a European presence, and we love
Oh.
helping provide solutions for organizations. And
Yeah.
thanks for having me, Anya. I love talking with you. I'll do it anytime.
Me too. And that's why I'm like, I know you and I all, like often talk about these things. And that's why this podcast was really my desire to start recording these conversations that I'm having with consultants and different leaders and be like, hey, here's what we're seeing. Because again, like you said, we have that, I think the benefit of like working with so many different companies that we
Yes,
can see like what is like unique to you. And often like it's not so unique. It's
right.
like it's everybody. It's like here's we're all in this together. We're all co-creating, whether
Yeah.
it's good culture and toxic culture. We're all in influencing each other. So appreciate all your wisdom. We'll share the recording. And yeah, guys, reach out to Jamie. She's lovely. And if you have any challenges with either training or HR systems or performance management or assessments, they're your place to go to. Thank you
Thank
and
you.
enjoy your day.
You too.
Thank
Take care. Bye bye.